you doing this morning, Carmen?
I am doing okay. I am extra tired today,
Oh
but
no.
that's
Oh.
I've been staying up too late, so it's my own
Good.
fault. Project
Good.
Runway reruns or binging Project Runway on Netflix has become a real problem for me.
Oh no.
But
We'll have to change your hours in the garden then
yeah,
to allow for Project Runway.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
I'm
I did
always like
something silly.
just one episode, but it's never just one, you know?
Uh, my
So
silly adventure this week was to add Cajun spice to my kombucha
oh
for
my.
the week in the bottles. And I only did a few because I thought this was really probably kind of a dumb move. And because I didn't know when I would actually drink something like that.
Yeah.
So the rest of it I put in my usual ginger and whatnot. But anyway, these 3 bottles. So today I tried the first one this morning and I realized it's not bad with eggs.
Really? So
But you wouldn't want to drink it when you're ready for fruit or something.
what is in Cajun spice? Like I'm trying to imagine what that
Oh,
tastes like.
yeah, that's a good question. It's kind of spicy, and it has a lot of different things in it, so it's very complex.
That sounds like a
But it doesn't.
strange,
It's not like the sweet fruit thing that we
right?
usually do with kombucha. It goes the
Right.
other way. Ugh.
Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting flavor.
Which is a marvelous segue to accent plants because they
Yeah,
are, in quotation marks, interesting
they're interesting.
with an exclamation point.
Mhm.
When let's see, when did you first get exposed to Kusamono? Do you remember a moment or a
Oh, yeah. It was in 2011 when I just started working with the bonsai collection at the University of Michigan.
Mhm.
My first introduction really to that collection was going with Connie Kranzer, who was taking care of the collection at the time. We went down to the ABS conference in Louisiana. No, not Louisiana. What am I saying? Louisville. Oh my gosh. Clearly, I haven't been getting enough sleep. But we were there, and in the show, there was a dandelion planted in a rock as an accent to, I don't remember the tree. Maybe I think it was a white cedar. And it like that one really hit me because it was what people see in their yard and try to get rid of, but it was so beautiful when it was put in a rock and presented as its own piece
Mhm.
of art. So that one's always really stuck with me, and I've kind of looked at weeds differently since then, as far as even stuff like stinging nettles and poison ivy, much to
Oh
my
yeah.
relief. And
Hmm.
as far as pots for accents, not necessarily, a pretty little glazed pot, but what about like a broken concrete block, or, something that just kind of
Mm.
reminds you of that weird plant growing in a sidewalk crack where you might
Mm.
see something like a dandelion. But that really kind of exposed me to how pretty an accent could be and how mundane the plant material could seemingly be.
Mm.
Instead.
So it sounds like that triggered a bunch of question marks.
Oh yeah, for
That's
sure.
good. Yeah. I think my first adventure with accents and larger Kusamono that was in Japan, where we had a lot of really large Kusamono and weed things, and then a smaller number of kusa or weeds that you would use maybe with a bonsai. But the one that I remember that really kind of started my curiosity was that Shinji Suzuki, my teacher, had collected 25 years before. It was an orchid. He collected it back when he was an apprentice, and it was some sort of terrestrial orchid. I never did identify it or anything, but Tachi and I were terrified of mismanaging the watering on this
Oh
orchid.
god. Yeah,
But it was probably, I don't know if it's fear or
right. There's
that
nothing
that
like
that
the fear
created the
of
interest.
ruining
Yeah.
a sentimental piece of your teacher's. I mean, I wouldn't know anything about that.
No, I wouldn't assume so. um, and I think ever since then, I've been really curious about them. Of course, the Kusamono were big. There were, some of them, the grasses and reeds were, 3 feet tall, and you put them in a big tokonoma. by themselves, along with a little bronze dragonfly or something as an accent, and perhaps a bird flying overhead on a scroll or something like that. And we create this whole imagination, and it it sends you into the feeling of summer. We did a lot of summer displays with the Kusamono,
Mhm.
and I think then later I kept that interest, and certainly, as you know, we have a lot of them in the garden there, and started playing with them in ways that continued the curiosity. John Eads and I went out to an area that had been burned in a forest fire, and we were specifically looking for pieces of burned log that we could use to plant perennials and maybe even small young sapling Northwest native plants as an imagination for a nurse log. And we found a couple of them when we brought them back, and we planted some things on those. And that was a lot of fun. And I didn't know whether to call that a kusamono or what to call it, but it was
Yeah.
it wasn't normal bonsai because it was mostly perennials and
Mhm.
really really young, just like 5-year-old plants, and that was kind of where we wanted to leave it.
Yeah, it's kind of like a
So yeah,
supersized Kusamono, or yeah, taking it one step
yeah,
further and going just
yeah,
bigger.
yeah, yeah. Those were 25-pound Kusamono.
Yes, can confirm they are, especially when they're wet.
Right.
You have at least
Yeah.
one blog post about those, and I remember seeing you putting those
Yeah.
together with John on the blog, and I really think they're super interesting and pretty. And now that they're a few years old, when we've
Hmm.
been moving them, in and out for the winter or during a super hot spell, uh, we've been noticing how the roots are of some of the plants are growing through the wood
Yeah.
and even sending out shoots on the other side of the log. And it's a really interesting
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
evolution of how that log is being
Uh-huh.
broken down and used, and how the whole
Yeah,
thing
it's been
itself is
colonized.
growing. And eventually that log will kind of just disintegrate, right? And just kind of be,
Yeah, it'll be a mass of roots. Yeah.
yeah.
And we keep accents in general kind of on the wet side. So you often
Mhm.
see roots, kind of bumping along, charging across the surface of pots and pieces of wood or whatever you might use, some rock to plant them on. I think this leads into really a discussion of styles, styles of accents. We have here in the United States our premier Kusamono artist, Young Cho, who does some absolutely gorgeous, very carefully designed, organized accents, one type of style. Our Othmar from Europe, real magician. He has some accent plants that he hasn't repotted in 20 or more years, and they're incredibly full, kind of jungly, really wild. They just feel like nature, They're
Mhm.
really really something. Helmut Bachmann makes some beautiful ones as well. I have a number of heroes out there, and each one of these people are doing slightly different. I mean, it's almost like the set of a branch on
Mhm.
bonsai, where if you're familiar enough with someone's work, you can see it across the room and you can recognize it.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting how you can see the artist in the Kusamono as well. It's would maybe seemingly be something that, oh, it's a plant, it's like a big messy plant. So how would you know who did it? But you really can tell the difference between who has put them together. And if you've ever done a workshop with Young Cho, she's so super fun. She's just like, she's so
Yeah.
happy
Yeah.
and cheerful and creative, and she's great to work with and watch build those
Yeah, the
things.
enthusiasm
Oh gosh.
is beyond infectious. You can go
Yeah.
away with, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the first
The,
time, I mean, I put some accent plants together for the university. We had a few in the collection, and then after a workshop with her with the local bonsai society, I remember getting super into it and being like, okay, yeah, we need these, and then going out around the properties and just digging stuff up and uh,
mm,
building
mm.
little Kusamono, and there's one in particular
Yeah.
that's been my favorite, and I just love watching it grow and change and keeping something in it that kind of blooms or does something special every season, so it's not just one one season, although
Yeah.
those two are important to have just one plant in a Kusamono.
Yeah, Kusamono, it's a part of bonsai, but it makes us think differently about it, and it almost has a spark of playfulness about even creating them and appreciating them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they do kind of rest in the what the Japanese will call so, or playful, childlike type
Mm-hmm.
aesthetic, of which bunjin and plants like that are a part of. But as you were saying, running outside and looking for what's out native. I mean, this is something that you can do for pennies, which is really
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. And you learn a little something. I have certainly when bumping around in the forest looking for some of the understory plants. But our fields are full of really interesting natives and semi-natives
Yeah,
that are sort
naturalized.
of becoming natives.
Mm-hmm.
I should, yeah, right. um, uh, that we see in the bird world as well, right? The
Oh
house
yeah.
sparrow and the starling, we see them
Mm-hmm.
everywhere, and we think of them as being ours, but they're not.
Yeah.
But flowering plants just open up a whole new world. I mean, of course, we have bonsai that flower as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's hard to walk away from sort of a seriousness that approaches our bonsai. And there's something about playful. It might have something to do with the expense. Might have something to do with how long it took you to get there. With an
Mm-hmm.
accent plant, you can enjoy it, in the moment you finish it, like some of the work of Young Cho, or
Mm-hmm.
you can, or it seems to build over time, like the work of our Othmar, or often, for most of us, if we build like a kokedama, which Young Cho does a lot. So this is a moss mound, and several plants are growing out of this, and has a little mesh bottom to kind of stabilize it while it's growing together. And often the next year can be really good. Most plants in pots tend to look really good the next year when things have grown in together a little bit. The plants have gotten a little fuller. So adding time for most of us can help, and many people appreciate the mochikomi feeling that companions, accents, I'm using these words interchangeably, have over time, where roots begin growing over a moss kind of spills over the edge of a pot or something like that. It begins to feel like one unit, that age has somehow changed what you have there.
Yeah.
That
Can you
is a fun
define
feeling. Mm-hmm.
mochikomi? I mean, I think I know what it is, and I
Mm-hmm.
think you alluded to kind of what it is, but for those who aren't familiar with that word.
It relates to time, and it relates to it for accent plants. It relates to the idea of one thing rather than a plant and a pot. You have a plant pot. I don't know if that's
The plant has
uh, or
so
plant
so one
rock
of
or
those
whatever.
plants, we've got an orchid in the greenhouse that essentially has engulfed and eaten the pot. So I
Oh,
would
that's
say
right.
that,
You can barely
yeah,
see it
there's
anymore.
that one. But
The little.
then the other kind of moss mound that's at the Japanese garden currently, it didn't start that tall, but it grew
All
to
right.
be that tall with the kind of the age, and you can see where the roots are kind of coming out and starting to you start to
Right.
lose the pot.
Right.
It's still there, but you can tell how old it is.
Right. Eventually, the pot becomes almost a stabilizing afterthought.
Yeah.
And the actual form, just to talk about it in sort of sculptural terms, morphs over time. It's almost like this amoeba that if you see, we did a fun little time lapse. It was like a 3-photo time lapse that bled into the next image of an accent that was changing over about 10 years. That's an awful lot of fun. I think I put that on my Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great example of mochikomi and how it can change. And you might like the first one, you hate the last one, the most recent one. But I kind of like this sort of mounding that the roots do. It's kind of strange. You think about it, and it's not necessarily pushing itself out of the pot. It's actually some of those fine roots of especially grasses and things like that are actually colonizing the soil and the moss itself, and it just kind of keeps building upwards. Whereas if you have a flat container with an outward flare and you put a grass in it, the grass can circle around on the bottom of the roots and literally push it up. So that's a little bit of a different animal. So these things can change in different ways. I find this a lot of fun.
And then, and not just with the size or the shape, but even the plants that can be within it. Because I think in the one that you time lapsed, it kind of started with more of a reed in it, and now it's got some different kind of plants in it. And
absolutely, there's no reed at all. Actually, I think I plucked the last little. There was one little thing left, and it didn't make sense. But you're right. So there was a violet that came in. There was it Speedwell?
Yep.
What's the genus of that?
It's a Veronica.
Thank you. Yeah, I always forget that one. And most of it is Veronica, and then there's a minor amount of the violet. Oh, and then there's a fern. So there's three.
Oh, right.
And this is another thing to talk about. Is one thing that I like to teach is that if you have multiple plants in there, think of one or more of the plants being accents to your major plant, the dominant plant, so that you have some sort of asymmetry within your composition. It might be, the plant that you want to focus on. You can do this with scissors. You can organize it with scissors, or some plants just simply are more vigorous, and they'll create more. Or you can be very, very selective about, okay, this is a plant I really want to focus on because it flowers really nicely. I want that to be a big splash. Or you want it to be not a splash at all, but a little grace note. So you have mostly grass, and then you have a little thing coming up like a spiral orchid or something. I remember seeing some of those in Japan. It was really fun. I was so excited when I actually saw one, in the wilds. I was near this pond, and they were surrounding the edge of this pond. They were in this mucky, water-saturated area, and this beautiful little, the tiny little pink flowers that spiraled up in this sort of half a DNA strand. sort of what it looked like. It was really thrilling. But those are really easy to grow, little terrestrial orchid. But that's an example of a sort of a grace note. Where you probably wouldn't have 20 of them in one pot with nothing, because you don't really see them that way. You also want to think that way. How are these usually seen? And if it's a grace note plant, or if it's something like what we have coming on now in one of our pots, which is a monkey flower, and that could take over the whole thing for a month or two as it's flowering, and then it'll recede and the grass becomes the dominant. So that's another thing, is that these things change not only over years, but they change over a month, where the dominant plant changes. And not only that, but where the flowers happen to be on that day can change the front of your accent. So just like bonsai, your accents, your kusa have fronts and backs. They have flow, right? And trying to create that with your scissors if you're into display, either outdoor display or indoor display.
One thing that I really like to do is use plants that remind me of places I've been. And I created a Kusamono this spring of Northwest natives, including some ephemerals. And so my goal with that was to remind me of all the plants that I've encountered here in the Pacific Northwest that I really love, and also have some kind of seasonality change. So the bleeding heart is going to bloom, kind of after the trillium, and the oxalis and the strawberry will kind of go, throughout the year. And so certain things will kind of die back, so something else can become the show, the showstopper, and then there should be something interesting kind of throughout the seasons. But then I have something else, and it's probably your favorite of all of mine, just the little liverwort in a pot.
I try to not look at it. Yes.
Yeah, I know how much you love it, but it's that one is just that's all it is. It's just it's one plant in a pot. How do you?
That's the one I try to underwater, Carmen. Maybe I'll finally kill it off. I'm sorry.
No, never. No.
If you look closely, it's a really interesting plant.
It can be a very interesting plant. But as an example, just having one plant in the container can be a whole other feeling.
Yeah, I like what you brought up about the sort of changing cast of something flowering, and then next month something else is flowering. So that once again raises the specter of learning something,
Yeah.
learning about the plants you're putting together, the plants in your area. We've been talking about running off into the woods, and I highly recommend that. But there's nothing stopping us from going to nurseries where you can discover natives in areas that you had never been before, maybe environments that you've
Mhm.
never been. We have a wonderful native nursery here that we enjoy going to, and I always find something I've never seen before, and that can be
Mhm.
fun, even if you're paying a few dollars.
Yeah, it's that's one of
Yeah.
my favorite nurseries that I've ever been to.
Hmm.
And I think what I like the most about it is how the owner has created little vignettes throughout that garden. So you're walking through a garden as you're shopping. You're not just going to a nursery with benches and everything that's laid out, but seeing those little vignettes throughout her garden takes me back to when I, back in Michigan was walking through the woods, and particularly in the spring, seeing the vernal pools where there's, just a couple trees sticking out, and just around the bottom of the tree is a fern and some moss, or, just one or two
Right.
plants kind of accenting that tree. And so
Oh,
seeing these little stories in the wild is a really great inspiration for your Kusamono. But then, yeah, being able to relate that to what I saw at the nursery in her little stories, it really kind of brings you into a place.
yeah, and I think even more than bonsai, I think Kusamono in particular give us a really strong sense of seasonality.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the fall, if our grasses are beginning to brown and die back, leave them for a while and enjoy them. And maybe even try and use them in displays, because that's one of the strongest clues as to when you are.
Mm-hmm.
So we often talk about in display making our companion plant match in terms of environment the place where the tree comes from. But a big part of display is also the when. It's seasonality. Really, really important point. And even if we're not into display, I think this is part of the playful part of accent plants, that it clues us in. It ties us to seasonality, even if we're kind of unaware of it in our walking around in our daily lives.
Yeah,
you know, we
I
can
think
become so
it's
with our accents.
it's a if you know a plant has a really interesting seed pod, then yeah, don't deadhead it when it's done blooming. Or if you
Right.
don't know what the seed pod looks like, let it go all summer and see what it looks like in the fall and if it's worth leaving on there. But columbine in particular is one that I love.
Yeah, I
The
was just
seed
going to
pod,
ask you. That's a
yeah,
cool one.
it's
Yeah.
so cool. It's almost cooler than the flower, and it's really neat in the fall to have as a display, and then even to cut it and bring it inside as a, just as a dry flower over winter is kind of fun.
Some of the reeds have really interesting
Yeah.
flowers that kind of poke out of the round. Just really, really interesting
Yeah.
stuff. Juncus.
Trying to remember, there was another one that oh, the little violet has a really cool little seed pod. It looks kind of like a little monster jaw that opens up, and
That's right.
it's
Yeah,
kind of weird.
it's a crazy shop of horrors kind of
Yeah.
plant. Yeah, something that carrion that would smell like carrion or something.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
would think
right. It's
so.
this dry pod. It's
It's
really
such a
weird.
pretty little flower, and then such a kind of creepy seed pod. But these things
Yeah,
are really interesting, and it gives you a chance to learn these plants in a little different way and see how they can interact with seasonality of your tree and all of that.
right. And then you can
Mm.
collect them
Yeah, and grow more.
and plant more.
Hmm.
Yeah. Usually in the winter, we're cutting all that stuff off
Yeah.
all the way down to the base, so that then the plant can regrow. So it's not trying to regrow through this sort of wiry hair of dead grasses and whatnot.
Yeah,
So that's the crew cut stage, and it allows us to enjoy the lumpy mounds.
yeah, the lumpy mounds are pretty interesting as far as shape goes. But yeah, it's a lot of similar care to what you would do to your perennial garden in the fall, and
uh,
cutting it
uh,
back or taking out dead stuff or
right, right.
anything.
Let's talk. Let's talk briefly about making them. We were just
Oh
we
yeah.
passed into the fall, skipping one of the major seasons
Hmm.
of accent plants, which is kind of strangely kind of early summer. It's after the first flush of growth is out, and it's one of the times of year that I really recommend putting together accents. For one thing, as we just talked about, sometimes we cut back, many of our perennial accents to the ground, to the soil level. And so if you're assembling them at the normal spring repotting season, you have no idea what you're working with. You got these little rooty things, and there's nothing coming out of them. But in the summertime, you're assembling things that you're looking at. You can play with, which is also a good thing because you can't. We're busy enough in the spring. We don't need another thing. Whereas in the early summer, sometimes we have a little bit more time, and they're so strong for the most part. We can be quite aggressive with them. We can tear apart clumps of grass, and place things in kind of thinly because we know it's going to get a little bit denser. And the soil that we tend to use is quite a bit finer than bonsai soil. Often there's an organic component. Potting soil is often a component of that. Maybe some a little bit of maybe perlite,
Hmm.
or pumice, something like that can be added to it to break it up a little bit. But companion plants they're kind of hungry plants. They like a lot of moisture. They need to be watered frequently. So having kind of a fine soil with some organic can support both of those needs. There are some that don't need any soil at all. Kind of the roots can kind of jump over, like the orchids that
Oh
Carmen was
yeah.
talking about. Some of the epiphytic type plants. And then there's placement during the year that we can mention in passing here. Is that most accents are going to want a little bit of shade in the summertime. Be careful, know your plant. Some of these really like a fair bit of sun, otherwise they won't flower very well. Also, if there's too much shade, you're going to get really large elements, really large leaves, long internodes, and things of that
Mhm.
nature. So there's a little bit of balance there. We usually have our summers are pretty dry and intense here in Western Oregon, so we use about 50% shade. That's about right. You can do this with benching, though. If you put your bench at half height and put it on the north side of another bench system that's higher, you can often do
Mhm.
pretty well with that. But we usually water them 2 or 3 times a day.
Something I'd recommend for those super hot days, especially if it's something that's not in a pot, that's just a mound, is to kind of set them in a little bowl of water almost. For when we had that big heat wave last year, where it was over
Yeah.
100 degrees, some of the ferns that were just kind of in, little moss balls just went right into a little pan of water to keep them hydrated
Yep.
through that. But yeah,
Yeah.
otherwise they're watered pretty frequently. Every time we check the bonsai, a lot of times they'll get
Yeah.
at least a little bit of a drizzle, if not a full soaking.
Great. Great.
Yeah.
And don't ignore the wetland plants either for
Mhm.
use of if you have a pot or a tray or something that doesn't have a hole in it. You don't need a hole for something like some of the reeds,
Mhm.
whatnot, that can be made into wonderful Kusamono. We're trying one I'm very excited about, which is cattail. We
Yeah,
dug them
that's
up a
coming
few
along.
years ago, and they've taken a little while to get going, but they're starting to
Mhm.
hold their own against the reed that's also in that pot.
I think once they really get a hold, they're you'll never get them. You'll never slow them down. I think next year it's going to be like, oh God, what are we going to
Hope
do with
so.
these?
I hope so. So far, we haven't had a cattail on the topic
Yeah,
of the one that's in the pot. I'm looking forward to that.
maybe this year.
Um,
Hmm.
I don't think we were fertilizing that one enough last year. As far as fertilizers go, I'm a real big fan of some sort of solid fertilizer for anything, a bonsai or a companion. Some of the solids, if you have animals, can be problems if it's an organic solid. You'll find that if you want to use a little pellet like Osmocote or something, very often it'll stay on a companion plant, even if it's a mounded one, where it won't stay on the bonsai because the companion plant has all these stems in the middle of it, which
Yeah,
just sort of sits in
it
there.
gets trapped in there.
Whereas it'll roll right off of a bonsai, so you could use the pellets for that. In
Hmm.
Japan, we just threw in one or two chunky pieces of cake
Hmm.
uh, right on the interior of big Kusamono, and that's about all they need. You don't want to over fertilize them, but I don't know. That
Yeah.
cattail seems like it wants a little bit more.
Yeah, that thing
It's a
will.
lot of vegetation that creates one piece that's coming up.
Yeah.
Oh boy. One thing to keep in mind is the plant that kind of blows in from nowhere. This seed that has, popped out somewhere else and either blows in or explodes out or something like that. And it lands in your pot, and it ends up germinating successfully. And give it a thought. I mean, sometimes those are things, maybe most of the times, those are the things you really don't want in there. But occasionally something will blow in that you didn't expect. We had a whole series of years when we had spiral orchids coming up and everything. And I didn't know if it was a combination of, some mycorrhiza that was happening in the companion plants or what, but they came up everywhere. And we didn't plant them there.
Yeah,
So
I
that was
haven't
kind of
seen as
fun.
many. I think we had maybe 2 this year that we've removed.
Yeah, we got to start propagating them again. They're
Yeah.
kind of fun. But
Yeah.
then things like hawkweed, which is really similar to
Oh,
dandelion, it has very quickly creates that seed head that'll blow all over, and that'll come up in everything. I mean, you
mhm.
don't even want it blowing into your house; it'll come up in your floorboards, I'm sure. It's scary stuff, but it's beautiful. And if that blows into a bunch of grass or something, it could look really nice.
Yeah, we left a
Uh,
lot of the seed pods on the
yeah.
columbine last year, and I've noticed that where they had
Right.
been living under the benches,
Oh.
now there's a bunch of columbine coming up, which some of it I've pulled and started propagating.
Oh
But
man.
I think
Uh,
this year will be a more selective. Which columbines do we want to keep
uh,
seed pods on? Because I don't think we need
funny.
maybe that many around.
Oh,
There's like
funny.
100 under one of the benches.
Uh,
Oh boy.
and another thing to think about for all you longtime gardeners, transfer your gardening tricks to Kusamono.
Mhm.
Many perennials can be deadheaded, like the hawkweeds you were just talking about, and they will continue to pump out flowers for a little longer than they would if they were, too busy creating a seed.
Mhm.
So think about that one.
So something I wanted to ask you, Michael, is about actual companion plants versus Kusamono. So we've talked about,
Mhm.
showing Kusamono and how to create a Kusamono that's interesting throughout seasons, but then we're also talking about pairing them with bonsai. So maybe let's talk a little bit about the differences of what you would put with a bonsai as far as size goes, or about complexity, because one of
Yeah.
these big Kusamono that is on display at the Japanese garden currently wouldn't really match with a lot of the bonsai that
Right.
we would display in a show.
Right. Right. Yeah, there's a few over there. One of them is a huge fern. It's a lady fern, and it probably
Mhm.
reaches 2.5 feet in all directions. And then there's a equisetum. There's a horsetail there that is at least 3 feet tall.
Mhm.
And you probably wouldn't find any normal size bonsai that would work with. So in terms of scale, that's truly a kusamono that you would display by itself. And in terms of just scale that you would use for a bonsai, be fairly minimal in size. Most kusamono aren't much more than 6 inches long. Of course, this is all variable according to the size of the bonsai.
Mhm.
And then for, if you're displaying something like a shohin bonsai, you're going to have a mame sized accent plant with maybe one little flower on it
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
something like that.
It's interesting to discuss it, because for those who are familiar with Kusamono and Kusa and how they're interrelated to bonsai versus just creating a
Right.
Kusamono for display on its own, which can be displayed in a tokonoma like a bonsai would be
Right.
with an accent and a
Right.
scroll. So there's the different sizes and scales and complexities and seasonalities, and just kind of what
We,
purpose, which one has
yeah,
purpose.
yeah, we could talk about complexity.
Hmm.
So if you go through, certain understories, often there's sort of monocultures down there. There's a little bit of variety, but very often something like hemlock is best displayed, I think, with like a single
Hmm.
companion plant. So in other words, not combining species.
Right.
Whereas if you have an oak tree, which might be growing in a field somewhere, fields are complex, meadows.
Mhm.
There you can have 3, 5 different species of plants, and it'll make sense.
Yeah.
So maybe some thinking along those lines. I think a lot of companion plants are far too complex
Yeah.
for bonsai display. I see many people putting together really radically different plants that
Hmm.
are so busy it almost takes away from the bonsai. So here we're talking about bonsai display, and then so I would recommend simplicity. One plant, maybe in certain circumstances three, but here again, make one plant truly dominant, like 80% one species, and then 15% another species, and then this little grace note of a little
Hmm.
fern that is hanging over a side, or maybe one little errant flower or something like that. Try to speak, like Miles Davis, uh, with your plants.
Yeah, and keeping your accents within the realm of what grows near or around the tree you're displaying in the wild, I think is super important. A lot of times I'll see something in a show
Right,
that, the scale is right,
right,
but
right,
and I think the person was thinking more just on the level of scale versus,
right,
is this to
right,
scale and does it match the tree? So
right,
kind of
right.
bringing those two ideas together is really important.
Right. Yeah, I see it. We all love these. Well, not all, but many of us love these. These sort of
Mhm.
epiphytic orchids, like dendrobiums and things like that.
Mhm.
And we have several in the greenhouse, and I see a lot of people using them in bonsai display with like a pine or something. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
They're from
That's good.
entirely different, not only environments but continents.
Mhm.
Um,
Maybe more
so
bonsai shows need to have space to display Kusamono because people want to make their accents complex or different, or so maybe in some of the local shows it
I
should
agree.
expand a
Yeah,
little bit more. Maybe we can add a
yeah.
Kusamono section, or yeah,
Yeah, and I think
just
in the recent national show, there was a
yeah,
section that Young Cho curated. I thought that was marvelous, to
yeah.
give that a nod, much as we do now and then some of the Siseki.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
that's a good adventure
I was
to
excited to see
encourage.
that happen at nationals, and I think it gives people an opportunity
Uh,
to see them and observe what they can do, and maybe inspire people to do more large scale kusamono that could
right,
be
right.
displayed.
One thing you want to control, going back to displays, if you do
Mhm.
display accents in particular, of course, you always want your accents maybe to look nice, but pests, is something to
Oh
think
yeah.
about. And one of the worst is slugs. We
Mm,
don't seem to have many, caterpillars nibbling on them, or here and there, there's an aphid if you got a, I don't know, woody
yeah.
perennial in there or something. But usually, you don't have many problems with that, but slugs. So
Yeah.
when I was in Japan, Suzuki's mom, who was in her 70s, would always be crawling around in the greenhouses, turning over the accent plant pots. And you'd always know when she'd find a slug because she'd give this great cry and she'd say, aha! And she'd take her chopsticks and she'd pluck the slug off from usually they're hiding in the drain hole during the day. And
Mhm.
she's, yamakushi. And I forgot what she'd throw them in. So I don't know if it was a thing of beer or whatever. But anyway, she'd
Yeah.
throw them in a little cup that she had there.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah,
And you knew
I
you knew when she had a good day because she was smiling at lunch
oh my
when the
gosh.
slug war was going well.
I was moving some around the other day, and I got a slug stuck like in between my fingers, and it's like I like couldn't shake it off, and then the slime just sticks there for yeah, it's unpleasant.
To prevent this unpleasantness, if you don't have chopsticks and you don't want to spend the time,
Mhm.
the slug bait available is actually non-toxic. It's,
Mhm.
I think, iron phosphate. Am I right? Is that what it is?
I think
And
so.
and it's essentially fertilizer.
Yeah.
So you can kind of scatter it around at will. If it even goes in the pots, that's fine. I usually spread it around the benches, especially in the early spring when the accent plants are growing out. They will make mincemeat out of things like irises they love, and so you have all these slimy holes everywhere.
Yeah.
Also some plants, jojoba, they like quince. They'll eat some things like that. They'll stay off your pines, but they'll eat anything that's kind of low and within an easy traveling distance from the bottom of the pot, which is where they hide.
I've been reading that copper keeps them away too. Thanks, Facebook. I haven't tried it, but I've seen people saying they put like rings of pennies around their hostas. I'm curious to see. I might take some of our old copper wire and like put it around.
That's worth a try.
And see if that actually works.
I remember that story as well. I don't think I've ever tried it, but
might be a good use for how to reuse the copper.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's our, well, hey, don't wait a minute. You're giving away our ice cream money. That's right.
Yeah. Well, never mind. We'll find pennies. Pennies are useless.
Right. Well, I hope you all go out there and play. To underline the main point, Kusamono, accent plants. This is just so much fun.
Oh, they're great. Yeah. Make some plantings, post some pictures to Instagram. It'd be great to see what people put together.
Yeah. Thanks, Carmen. It was fun.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael.
The music on today's podcast was brought to you by the fine folks at Blue Dot Sessions. Check them out at www.sessions.blue.